Right, good evening, everyone. So I want to thank you all for attending this session. The session is called Managing Power BI Development. It is a quick sort of DevOps practice or management practice from a Power BI solutions architecture perspective. In other words, how to manage Power BI development or Power BI projects at your organization or together with your customers. So to start off, and I'll see my one moment for me. See my presentation tools stop working. Right. So to start off, I just want to sort of make everyone aware this session is brought to you by PowerBI Days, the official Power BI user group in Belgium. And I would like you guys just to visit their website at www.powerbidays.com and register for the January conference. So there's a two-day, there's a the 26th of January, which is in Belgium, and then the 27th of January, there's an online conference. So my name is Andreas Bergstedt. I am a data platform and BI solutions architect. And if you would like to, you can visit my blog at blog.bi360.ml for more content and tutorials from me. So let's get started. So the agenda for today is we're going to go through Power BI IDE. So we're going to look at the integrated development environment. So if that's Power BI Desktop or Power BI Web, we're going to talk about the differences between those two, the sort of pros and cons around them. And we're also then going to do little overviews about what they're about and what you can and cannot do. Then we're going to look at data sources and security, so how security is applied within Power BI, and that goes from things like access, sharing ability, actual data security, if you're worried about that, and how to tackle those kind of concepts. We're going to look at how we can use environments in Power BI. It is slightly difficult because you can't deploy Power BI as a web service or web app in different isolated environments. So there's little tips and tricks on how to handle environments when you're developing and deploying. We're going to look at source control with Power BI, and that is a little bit of a myth, or it's not so automated as it should be, but we'll go in and how to handle source control with Power BI. And then we're going to end off with a 15-minute Q&A that's been scheduled in. Right, so sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of some of the toolbars. There we go. So if we get started, so if we look at Power BI or the integrated development environment, so if we look at the other Microsoft BI stacks or BI components, so like SSIS, reporting services, those kind of things, we all drive them through Visual Studio, but unfortunately Power BI, our best development tool or design tool is the Power BI Desktop. And we have some strengths with Power BI Desktop. The one is transportability, so we can develop a dashboard or a report. We can publish it. We can transport it from one computer to the next. I can send it to a colleague for further work and refinement, and he can work on it locally. The second thing that is a strength in using Power BI Desktop as your IDE is the fact that you have more data diversity. So you can work easily with embedded or local data sets, and you can refresh those into sort of your Power BI reports. So when you publish them, they'll be embedded. Whereas when you work with the web, you work with what services the web platform can get to at that point in time. It doesn't limit you to things like flat files because you can collect them locally or pick them up from your OneDrive or the likes of those. But data diversity is a lot better in the desktop tool, and the support is easier. Then we look at the web, or think about the web. So the web editing, authoring, report authoring interface is a little bit more basic, but it has one major strength, and that's device independence. And I just want to talk a couple of seconds around this device independence, because I recently went through a POC development or POC product development using Power BI as a visualization tool. And in the end, there was a few, or the reason why the POC got canned or shut down and never went further was there's one piece around the ID. There was an armada of developers that were using Macs, and they found it very, very difficult to succumb to the idea of running a VM in their Mac on their Macs, a Windows VM on their Macs, so they could run Power BI desktop for development purposes. So device independence, whilst it's not from development, whilst it's not a major thing for most Power BI developers, it does get challenging if you're trying to get a greater adoption in a non-Microsoft or non-Windows crowd of people. So yeah, that can be a bit of a challenge. Anyway, what's also important to understand the difference between web and desktops, besides the strengths, so the strengths of desktop, the transportability and the diversity, is also the weakness of the web development platform. And I'll explain that right now. So if we look at sort of Power BI, so let me bring this into focus. So in sort of apps of PowerBI.com suite, and you go and you look at things. So I've got in my workspace, I have a report that I built using web authoring with inline CSV data sets. And if I want to share this for editing, I can't do so. I can't download this and get it on the desktop. But when it comes to my Power BI reports that were built in desktop, I can go and pull the source code or download it and edit it further, and then share it with my colleagues or another UI expert or someone that deals with flow or whatever it may be for further development or refinement, or user acceptance testing or something like that before going on. So that this is something that's really, really important when we look at the differences between web and the desktop Power BI editing or authoring. Okay. Another thing in this is about data sources and security. So there's three main security concepts that we deal with in Power BI, and that is access. So in other words, who's got access to the reports and being able to open them up or author them or edit them. Who's got access to the workspaces, and we'll go through those now. The concept of sharing. So in other words, I can share a report or dashboard or an app with an external contact or an external identity. And then the ties around data security and how we can have a central app or a central dashboard report that is segregated between HR, for instance. So if we've got some HR report and you got maybe HR director needs to see the global organization's view and earnings and that sort of thing, and but you don't only want department heads to be able to pull reports or view data for their departments. So the whole concept around security in Power BI, and especially around data security. There is different ways of dealing with these kind of things. So the first questions are obviously when you're working on a Power BI project or a product development project that deals with whatever it may be, some dashboards and reporting that you need to build. Some of the questions that you should ask up front are the things about what are the best data sources for my requirement, because there are a lot of complications that can come by choosing the wrong data source up front later on in the project. So, and I'll give you, for example, if you've got a requirement to isolate data, so you have a multi-tenanted Power BI app that you're sharing with your customers, but you have a central data warehouse or data store for all your customers' data. Obviously, you don't want customer A to view customer B's data. So this is the talk. This is the whole concept about data security. Traditionally, how this is done is row-level security, and we do so. The easiest way of doing that is to use SQL Server analysis services. When it comes to Power BI, my recommendation is to probably use Azure. Well, it is to use Azure SSAS because it has a lot more flexibility when it comes to federating data out. If you're doing a project for an internal organization, I would probably recommend, well, I would still recommend Azure SSAS, but if you have enough sort of on-premise or data center capability, running analysis services of your own SQL Server instance, that's all fine by me. It does give you a bit of more flexibility running your own hosted on-prem analysis services, and especially when if you're dealing with isolating developers with people that can deploy. In other words, how you deploy in different environments and how you do your testing. If you use the on-prem data gateway for analysis services, that becomes easier. Whereas the Azure analysis services becomes a lot more manual when you try to step from one environment to the next. Right. So best data source for my requirements. So simple thing, if you need data segregation, I would always recommend analysis services and using role-based security. That way, if user A logs in, user A sees user A's data, or if user B logs in, user B sees user B data. The security integration is easiest with Azure analysis services because you can just provide you have a security table that you've spin up all your relationships, that all your federated accounts have some form of access to, and you don't have to worry about mapping Power BI identities to local Active Directory identities if you're using the data gateway. So there's always, there's a trade-off on one. Right, and also if you're looking at, the whole thing around sharing is also another problem. If you provide sort of access to a dashboard So let's say my web dashboard that I created, I've got some sensitive information that that I don't necessarily want everyone to see. If I share that out or provide access to Workspace, I have to remember what I published there, because obviously segregation doesn't exist. But it's always important to understand, if I expect data to be segregated, I have to look at things like row level security. If I expect just to be able to share, then anything goes, inline data sources, etc. Also, the difference, so if we look at data sources, so this whole thing around direct to live data, so if you're doing once-off developments, you know, inline data sources, they might be a good idea. So if you're doing some once-off dashboard that or dashboard that you update once a year, and this is a sort of a research activity, then inline data source, prepared inline data sources would be a good idea. Makes your life easy, as long as you don't need to worry about segregating data for different users. Obviously, live data sets is, in my mind, is best, especially if you're looking for segregated data. Another thing around Power BI and how the security, so there's a link in the bottom of the slide if you're worried about how the actual security topology works within Power BI. The link there is to a page where you can download the white paper. Right. So some of the major challenges when you're developing in Power BI is to separate environments, and how do we handle environments in Power BI. So this was, and I've got to give credit to a lovely developer, and she's really good at this. She belongs to the London Power BI user group. Her name is Prathi. She showed me how to do this last year. We actually worked through this and came up with a viable solution. So in my case, I have a BI analyst or data analyst that does reporting builds and dashboard builds. I've got a SQL developer, and I've got DBA, and I have some other development resources. Now, one of the challenges is obviously with the company I work for, we have this idea that, you know, when we're building customer-facing applications, you obviously don't want to just release stuff. You know, you have to go through dev, put it into integration or testing or stage, and then move that into production once signed off. And the workspaces in Power BI actually helps you do this quite easily. So I'm going to now go back into a bit of a demo. So if we look at our workspaces, so here I've got a dev workspace, and I have this Azure SAS demo workspace. So for instance, in the dev workspace, I have a report, and this report, you know, it's interactive. It speaks to analysis services. It works fine. You can click through it. You can filter, but it's missing a little bit of finesse, right? So if we step back, if I show you my same report, this one is associated. Let's have a look. So I just need to see which one I opened up. Yes. Okay. So this is my dev report, right? So let's say we want to add a filter. So I am going to throw in a shipment type filter where we can slice out cross-border shipments or domestic shipments. And we can look at those volumes. Right, we're going to save this, and we're going ahead and we're going to publish it into our dev workspace. So here's, we've now published it into, we're going to replace the existing one. And that's now been sort of moved into the development workspace. If I now go back and reload the report, I now have the filter slicer in there. So this is a scenario. What just happened is that I took a development artifact that's got access to a certain set of data in analysis services. I then added or edited the actual report and added a slicer. I then went ahead and published it into my development workspace. So let's say this is not passed on, or the UAT person now takes this through with whomever the owner of this is, and they sort of approve it. And once they approve it, they can just simply, whomever deploys can just go ahead and download the dashboard. And we're just going to wait for that to open up. So bear with me a couple of seconds. It's opening my side. Just need to sign in quickly. Right, so that has now appeared on this side. And I can now go and, so let's say I want to put this into production. I'll go and modify my data source settings. I have, in this case, I have two data models or databases with identical structure. One is a development database, and one is the production database. So I'll go ahead and open that one. That looks like it's loaded. So now we can go ahead and publish this. Let's go ahead and save it first. Sorry. And we go and publish it into our production now. Before I hit publish there, if we go and we look at the production workspace, there we go. And we go and look at the existing report. And that report looks like this. It's got a bit of a geography map and a line chart and some column graphs on that. So we go back to this step and we go select the demo workspace, replace the existing one, wait for that to complete. And that is now done. We then go back to our web browser and we reload this report, and you'll see that it's been updated. Right, and as you see, we now have a tree chart instead of the geographical chart, and we got that slicer in that that we had earlier, and everything is working. So, yeah, so this is a bit of a way of handling your environments. So I illustrated how you could use the workspaces to create a development environment or a staging environment or testing environment, and also then a production workspace where you could deploy your final product or customer-facing product. There are obviously things that one need to think about in this. You obviously need to have a refresh algorithm or a refresh process that goes and updates the apps that you surface. So if you've built PowerBI apps through the app workspaces, you need to go and rebuild those and make sure they get reproduced to carry the new dashboards or the new report artifacts. There's other things you need to take into consideration about how you handle your data and that sort of thing. So at this point in time, I just want to also show a little bit around the other data types. So if we look at, I'm just going to go off screen quickly with this one. So if we look at some issues with security, or we look at how you would manage other live connections like on-prem data gateway and that. If we go through that, I'm just off screen signing in to another account. Please bear with me. So I just want to right. So if we were using the data gateway, we would have to worry about things like mapped URIs or security, sorry, not URIs, identities. In this case, you would have to map. Well, we've granted some people access, and we would need to somehow get them to authenticate to our local analysis services instance. You would have to worry about mapping external identities. So if you share this externally with customers, you would have to worry about how you map that to an internal identity. And this is another security vulnerability, if you want to call it that. It's an additional process to manage. Unlike with analysis services in Azure, where that would just be natively given based on a group or an authentication token in Azure or in analysis services there. Cool. Right. Other things, or the next step is about source repos and how do we source control and how do we version. Now, yeah, there is an ugly truth to this, and that is that obviously there is no native integrated source controlling like we do in Visual Studio or other IDEs. So there's no direct plugins into Visual Source Safe or Visual Studio or Azure DevOps or any of those. But there are ways around this. I had built, prior to this, I had built a sort of a DevOps engine for Power BI that plugged into the Power BI APIs. Now that unfortunately got destroyed. That code and that engine got destroyed about 3 weeks ago with my laptop getting trashed. But I will make that available on GitHub via my blog post. But I'll get that out. But there are ways around it. So I'm going to give a quick demo, and hopefully this worked. So I have a source repository in SourceSafe, and I've made a change to my dev code, or to the dev demo whilst we were doing this, and we have changes pending. So obviously you can use something like Source Explorer or Team Explorer in Visual Studio if you use Visual SourceSafe or Azure DevOps. And you can work with your Power BI files or dashboard report files and save them in a specific, checked out repository and work with them there. Add your commit codes. So this one was added filter on shipment type, and obviously go and commit your changes. Go ahead and push them into source control, and now they're sitting in your repo. Obviously, this sort of activity can be a little bit batchy, and also one thing to understand is that if using a static data source like a flat file or something like that for data augmentation, you can your Power BI files will obviously grow because they contain the data within. So that's also something to think about, and when you trying to source control. Okay, I don't think I have anything else, and I think that is pretty much the end of the content. So I believe there is 15 minutes of scheduled Q&A time. And just a reminder that the session was brought to you guys by Power BI Days, Belgium Power BI user group. And please go ahead and take a quiz through their website at www.powerbidays.com, and please take interest and register for their event. And again, I will be sharing my my source code library for my DevOps engine or my deployment engine for Power BI on blog.bi360.ml. So yeah, please also walk through and have a look there. And that, I think, is it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andreas. At the moment, there are no questions yet. Yeah. I suppose if nobody has any questions, then maybe you can talk us through the troubles that you had setting this up at a customer. That's always a fun story to hear.
Yeah, so my customer was the internal organization I work for. So I work for a company called Meetup. We have we build sort of delivery management APIs or APIs for or to integrate the sort of e-commerce environments, ordering systems and warehouse systems with carriers. So in other words, ASOS or H&M, for instance, they place an order, they get a customer that places an order. That then goes through our system, make an API call to us. We then go and select the correct carrier for the destination for the consumer, and we handle the tracking information in between. So I work where I head up the data services division, and where this whole thing happened was we have this product. We were building this product last year. And it was to go live on our conference in end of February this year. So what happened was that I built it all using PowerBI. We had a sort of a steady stream where we had a few POC customers. I can't name them, but some of our customers were POC customers. We had shared out or given them access through their Power BI tenants to go and browse through the dashboards and run their inquiries and sort of trial it out. And during this process, we were using the app Workspaces to go and deploy new features and updates and that sort of thing. For source control, we used Bitbucket, so another Git repository. And we had, like I said, the challenge that came in was more on the EDI side. So it was the rest of the armada of developers that weren't comfortable sort of subjecting themselves to installing Parallels or VMs on Mac and working with Windows for their Power BI development. That was the biggest challenge, and that's ultimately how this whole thing crashed, regardless of if it was the right solution or not. That was my challenge with working in a bigger scale Power BI project. Other projects I worked with, they were so ancient. They were back in sort of 2015, early 2015, when Power BI was very beta and not really user friendly or developer friendly at all. But yeah.
Okay. I suppose you have some customers right now who are using Power BI.
Yeah, well, I've got, like I said, I have internal customers, so we use Power BI for our internal reporting and dashboarding. Yeah. We use it for our sort of status dashboards. So we measure data latency. We have a few data latency dashboards we run, so we can see trending. We do a bit of sort of long-term or trend analytics in it too. There's some really nice advanced analytics charts that exist, so you can look at things like linear regression, that sort of thing, see how your how performance is either degrading or getting better. Look at things like what is your trend cycle analysis and that sort of thing. So yeah. We use it definitely internally. It is also easier. So we have obviously different departments. One of them is the carrier. So we have a department that care about the carriers like DHL and Hermes and Royal Mail and those guys. They do a lot of monitoring on the shift in volumes by geography. So yeah, previously we were about a year and a half ago, they were still using reporting services reports that our team was producing for them. And this was, very tedious. And they would get mail shots once a week on what is the carrier volumes doing, and they were not interactive. And this is where Power BI is a lot better. Obviously, it's a lot more intuitive, and they're able to interact a lot better with it, and information is a lot easier for them.
So internally, I suppose you have a data warehouse set up. Do you deploy that from source control right to a build server to the server itself, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so we obviously we source control it. There is a Jenkins job that runs API commands at the moment. So if let's say one of my developers goes and updates a repo, and there's a version tag that changes, Jenkins will pick up the job, go and grab the PowerBI desktop file, and go and push it using the API. It obviously sends alarms that things have been updated, but it's all handled within the Jenkins framework. The code that I had was using the Azure DevOps, so there was some ARM scripts and that I had there. I had to trash them. I rebuilt my my Azure account not too long ago as well. I also had some local SSIS jobs, so I had two ways of doing it. I had a local SSIS job that also went and managed data connections to make sure that no one published a report that was connecting to the wrong data source. And that's also one of those challenges. So if you're using the on-prem data gateway, it's, whatever that data source is at, and you're using the workspaces, whenever you publish using one of those organizational data sources, they always end up in the right data set. So you never publish a dashboard with the wrong data source in it. But if you publish using analysis service or Azure analysis services as a data source, you obviously, every time you publish, you have to go and update your connection strings. So you're using the right data source, and that is a bit of a tricky one to handle. Obviously, performance is a lot better when you're interacting with analysis services in Azure than what it is with an on-prem data gateway hosted in some data center somewhere.
Okay. Well, I'd love to have you do a demo of that next time when it's possible for you, because I'm sure a lot of people are very curious about how you are handling that.
Yeah, it is. It is one of those. So whenever you go to some form of dev camp or something like that, there's always someone that sits that have an issue. The last one I went to, there was a general. He was a head of, I can't remember which company it was from, but he was a head of development on the data platform side for a large organization, and they were struggling with this whole way of handling deployment pipeline, especially for Power BI. It is just because that the development, Power BI desktop is, it is so compartmentalized into itself, and there is no plugins for anything else. Everything has to be custom built outside of that, that is one of the biggest challenges if you're dealing with large-scale enterprise development in Power BI.
Yeah. Hey, speaking about plugins, I recently found out there's a GitHub project from some guys at Microsoft, and it's actually a plugin for Azure DevOps, what used to be Visual Studio Team Services, and it allows you to automate that API part of picking up a PBX file, deploying it, changing the connection strings. So you should check that out.
I'll definitely do a search for that. Do you have any idea who built it, or by name? You know who it was?
No, but I mentioned it in my presentation at SQL Saturday in Holland, and I'm cruising over there right now and opening it, so I can actually tell you about it.
No worries.
So, I'm just stalling at the moment.
No worries. I'm not going to tell a joke to stall time, but for sure, this is obviously if the kind folk at Microsoft has built something. I obviously missed
wasn't final yet. They were still developing it, and all kind of feedback was very welcome. So I have the link. I'll paste it in the chat. You could open it in the web browser as well. Let me broadcast it to everybody. There you go. So if you go to the browser, it's github.com/Microsoft/PowerBI VSTS extension. Yeah,
That
there
guy.
it is.
Yeah. So obviously we can. Right. So yeah, this is definitely a project I'll go through and I'll have a look. And yeah, maybe what I'll do is I'll reconstruct mine as well, and I'll probably compile that and submit the session for Power BI Days in January, just on that little DevOps chain.
Yeah, you should do that.
Yeah.
Because it's quite a hot topic. I spoke about it at SQL Relay, or it's called Data Relay these days. Did the same thing in SQL Saturday Holland. And at Data Relay, Craig Porteous from SQL GLA from Glasgow, he told me he was working on something as well, and I should have included it somewhere. So he was working. I don't see it directly. He was working on his own Power BI modules to actually call the API and process Power BI files, upload them, change connection strings, change data sets. The API is where it's at right now. And programming that using PowerShell, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
One of the challenges last time I built around the API was the specific set of user mappings. There was no API calls at that stage for user mappings, so you had to set them up once per gateway or data set in your gateway. And that was one of those pieces that was manual, especially if you're using on-prem data. So that was one of the things that I found challenging. But in terms of obviously going probing, updating credentials, updating data sources in actual Power BI files, and that's yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So Joseph Barsch, he asked us, are we heading to PAS Summit? I can say that I'm not heading there, sadly enough, but maybe you are.
No, I'm not. My budgets won't allow it. We'll see if what happens. I might join in about a year's time or so in Seattle. We'll see, but we'll see what happens. But the one upcoming, I have no. I'm not going to be there.
Okay. Joseph is doing an ADF version 2, so Azure Data Factory version 2 presentation there.
Right.
So yeah, he'll keep in touch with us if he sees any sessions on the entire Power BI automation stuff.
Cool. That would be great.
Cool. So I guess we can end it here unless you have anything else you want to share.
No, that is it for me.
Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to your submission for the Power BI days. You do have to hurry. It closes in 4 days.
Oh,
so
geez. Okay. I'll be I'll be on that one.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Talk to you later, Andreas.
Thanks very much.
Bye.